I was just reading Jim Garrity, who's a writer at National Review and very good writer. He was saying that Democrats are finally upset with the Russians, not over Crimea or Ukraine or any of these other issues, but no, because they feel that the Russians may have actually been behind the stolen emails and then the email dump on the eve of this Democrat National Convention in Philadelphia, and so that's really got them upset. This does not mean, by the way, that it's Vladimir Putin's hand. It could be, I suppose, but the fact of the matter is, if they have more emails of Hillary Clinton's and they end up dumping those that prove her criminality to a degree that is just beyond the pale, and that could happen come this fall. They have more of those. I mean, Putin's still probably thinking she brought me that stinking reset button for crying out loud, which that she got her translation wrong. Uh, 7 minutes after 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. Reminds me of that episode of I Love Lucy, where Lucy meets Ricky's father and tries to speak to him in Spanish. And Ricky's father goes off the deep end, screaming and yelling and arms flailing. And she says, "What happened?" And Ricky says, "You just called him a big fat pig in Spanish." Well, that would do it, wouldn't it? Right now it is 69. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. John Kerry finally names the terrorists. This from The Resurgent, the writer Eric Erickson. John Kerry has gone further than the president ever did. He said we had to fight these terrorists, and doing so, quote, has the ability to literally save life on the planet itself, unquote. Of course, it was not ISIS he was talking about, nor was it radical Islam. It was air conditioners and refrigerators. He's overseas, by the way, talking about these issues right now. John Kerry wants the third world to give up basic sanitation and cool air so the rest of us can survive. And Erickson says, I wonder if he'll turn off the air conditioner in his private jet. So here we are. We're at war with ISIS, whether or not anybody in this government will admit it. We have wars going on in our streets, being fueled and being egged on by people behind the Black Lives Movement, those people in government who have egged them on. You know, you sometimes you get behind a force because you think it's going to help you politically, and then it gets out of hand, and then you lose control of it. That's what's happened. That's why we have a funeral coming up for a police officer in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in just a few minutes. We have that funeral coming up because, once again, as Democrats were trying to divide people in this country and win votes from these little slices, each different minority group, they caused this uproar that led to the deaths of all of these police officers. And I don't think you can question that. I think that is as obvious. And you know what? Probably some email there somewhere. And someday that may come out as well. Speaking of all of this, we have a fellow who is dead smack in the middle of it by the name of Donald Trump. The Republican nominee for president happened to be appearing on one of these programs over the course of the weekend, these highly rated Sunday morning programs. He was talking with Chuck Todd from NBC, the host of Meet the Press. Todd was asking him about the Muslim ban. Now, here you go again. The mainstream media is trying to skew this story. They don't want to tell you the real facts. Trump never said I heard somebody, one of these clowns on Morning Joe a couple of weeks ago saying Trump's going to deport all the Muslims from the United States. Never did the man say that. All he said was, we're going to stop immigration from those parts of the world, refugees, whatever you want to call it, until we can figure out a better way to vet who these people are, because most people don't think the vetting process is working. Is this an overall ban? No. So there's no deportation planned. There's no overall ban because, in other words, if somebody is coming from a country where there's not a lot of terrorist activity, apparently Donald Trump doesn't have an issue with that. But you wouldn't know it if you were paying attention to the mainstream media, which is just echoing the talking points of Hillary Clinton. So this is Donald Trump. And he's basically telling Chuck Todd something that I said a long time ago. Nobody has a right to come to America.
I'm looking now at territories. People were so upset when I used the word Muslim. Oh, you can't use the word Muslim. Remember this. And I'm okay with that because I'm talking territory instead of Muslim. But just remember this. Our Constitution is great, but it doesn't necessarily give us the right to commit suicide, okay? Now, we have a religious, everybody wants to be protected, and that's great, and that's the wonderful part of our Constitution. I view it differently. Why are we committing suicide? Why are we doing that? But you know what? I live with our Constitution. I love our Constitution. I cherish our Constitution. We're making it territorial.
In other words, if you're coming here from a country such as Syria, you are going to have to go through a process that is going to be a little bit more, the bar is going to be set higher. On the other hand, if there are some Muslim countries in the world where things are a little quieter, then perhaps, the vetting process will not be as, the bar won't be set so high. Although the problem there is to say that there's any quiet Muslim republic anywhere around the world right now is a little ridiculous. I mean, Trump knows that too. I have this as well. Munich man who screamed at mall murderer wishes he had a gun. Website is called Bearing Arms. A German man who got into a 90-second yelling match with a German Iranian mass murderer who lured teens to a McDonald's with promises of free food told a British news outlet that if he had had a gun, he would have ended the spree killer's rampage himself. Germany has some of the strictest gun laws in the world and only 5.5 million legal registered guns. Get that? 5.5 million registered guns in Germany, legally registered. However, that does not mean that Germans listen to their gun laws. Estimates are that there are up to nearly 40 million illegal firearms in Germany. What's that line? Oh, yeah. If you outlaw guns, then only outlaws will have guns. We have a caller with us. Number 736-0300 to reach the program. You're up next on Top Story on KLIX.
Yes, the delusional thinking of authorities in our country, when we look at Europe, and it just seems to be happening. I mean, is it really ever going to slow down? I mean, we don't really know because their intelligence is obviously not cutting it over there. And, the people are dying and suffering. This kind of thing cannot come here. But you see, there seems to be no sense of urgency about the well-being of our citizens. So when Trump gave his speech the other night and he laid out, thing by thing about what we need to do, and I thought, my God, somebody actually says it, and I actually believe him. And I said, am I a fool? Why is it that people can't see what Trump is saying? Maybe he is a lying son of a, whatever. I don't think so, though. And just like his children, they all are upright and mobile. They're functioning adults with functioning families. I don't know. I'm proud of my children, and it was a hell of a job raising them.
Sure.
It's not easy. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and you think about this, in London alone, there are 1 million Muslims? And I'm not just England, but London alone. And then you've got probably a few million of them in the suburbs of Paris. There is no way that Europe at this point, that the tentacles are buried so deep within the beast that you cannot remove it. It is there. They're going to have to learn to live with it. There will be wars in the streets of those European countries.
Well, I'm going to hang up. I know I got to go.
Hey, thank you much for the call, sir. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on KLIX.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. Thank you for taking my call. Hope you had a good weekend. What you just said, talking about Trump, is exactly right. You go back to World War II, when Pearl Harbor happened, what did the United States do? They gathered up all the Chinese or Japanese, put them in internment camps. Now, am I for that? No, it's pretty radical. And then I'll bet you they stopped all people coming from Japan. I bet you couldn't get a plane from Japan in the United States to save your life.
Yeah.
You do what you got to do to protect the homeland. And for people to say Trump is wrong, Trump is being mean, he's making things sound darker than what it is, no, he's talking real life. That's all the man's doing, is trying to protect this country and get into a position where he can do it more effectively. And I think the naysayers and the whiners and the bellyachers, you just need to think about that, because it might be your family that gets blown up. It might be one of your family that gets shot. All he's trying to do is help. That's a hell of a lot better than what these stupid damn Democrats and liberals are trying to do. They want everybody to feel good around the whole wide world. Oh, yeah, and they want me to pay for it. I mean, it's coming to a point now, it's ridiculous. Absolutely asinine.
Hey.
But anyway, Bill, thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you. I think you're spot on. And, keep in mind that roundup of those folks of Japanese ancestry was done by the icon of the American left, Franklin Roosevelt. Just reminding you. 917. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. 736-0300, the number. And you're next. You're on air.
Couple things, Bill, and good morning. And concerning the conventions, I remember watching a convention way back when, and one of the major news networks had a reporter out, and there was a vacant lot, and of course every lot is given a number, and the reporter said, well, somebody's been voting at that lot. By the way, this was in Chicago. There was a convention in Chicago, and I don't remember the year. But anyway, so then it goes to a really nice headstone. Somebody died, oh my goodness, a long, long time ago. And the reporter said, somebody's been voting at that guy's been voting ever since he died. And the final thing that I remember is that, you may die in Chicago, but you'll always vote.
Yes.
So, and so I remember that. And I also remember a budding reporter, Dan Rather, he stuck his mic. A couple guys on the floor were trying to carry out a conversation. And Dan Rather kept putting his mic in the face of those guys. One of them finally laid Dan Rather on the floor. I mean, yeah, just belted him right in the gut, laid him out. I still remember that. The other thing I wanted to bring up is there's two words that describe all of the terrorist activity, or at least 99.9%. It's called Islamic Quran. The Quran, of course, commands those that follow it to kill us infidels. That's the motivation, folks. And and unfortunately, when we have an administration that's sympathetic to either cover up or to side with the Islamic terrorists, jihadists, and so forth, and not want to say anything about it, it shows really where they're at. But folks, that's the motivation, is the Quran. I hope everybody, maybe you'll announce about the speaker coming up on the 4th of August at the Roper Auditorium as well. And we need to wake up, folks. This country is being lost very rapidly. Some of us that are a little older have seen it just totally melt before our eyes.
Well, and by the way, a belated happy birthday.
Hey, thanks a lot. Appreciate it very much. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thanks a lot, Bill. Bye now.
Take care now. Thank you for the call. Look, break coming up. A hard break. More of your telephone calls, though. If you're so inclined, keep them coming. I've got to though, sit down here and listen to some of our fine sponsors for a moment. Hope you'll do the same. News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. And I have the clipping with me from a Powerline blog, John Hinderaker's Powerline blog. I think that's what it's called. On those crime numbers I cited earlier, the president keeps saying there's no serious, outburst of crime. By the way, I want to take away your guns, though, because it's causing crime. But there's no crime. We'll talk about that, too, on the way in just a few minutes on KLIX. Quick reminder, now we are looking at some temperatures well into the 90s in the next several days. We're going to have some days perhaps reaching near triple-digit highs. So if you'd like to make sure that your air conditioning unit's still humming through the remainder of summer, you need to give our friends at Ramsey Heating and Electric a telephone call. But also, keep in mind in about 6 weeks, we're going to start getting some chilly overnights. And, you'd like to find out that your furnace has an issue before you get to the cold weather. So if you'd like someone to check it out in advance, call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric. The team at Ramsey's will make sure it's done right the first time. Problem-free, cozy winters are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. And you can telephone them at 678-0459. Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. Telephone number for reaching our program today, 736-0300. That's 736-0300. And you're up next on KLIX.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I was just thinking about how the mainstream media just seems to get everything wrong nowadays. I remember back during these debates, there was all 17 candidates up there, and I remember the CNN was asking the questions, and I think they asked Bobby Gentry, I think is how you say his name, in Florida, that's what his favorite fantasy football pick was, and Chris Christie interrupted. He goes, "Look, we got problems with crime and jobs and stuff, and we're up here talking about fantasy football."
I remember.
Thank you.
Hey, yeah, and was one of probably Chris Christie's better moments, who will be the Attorney General of the United States, I believe, under a Trump administration. It's 9:25, and you're on the air on News Radio 1310 KLIX. What's on your mind?
Yeah, am I talking right now?
You certainly are. Go ahead.
I have a question. It seems like we're rampant in our county right now with some of the wrongdoings of our leaders. The sheriff of our county, I'm kind of concerned about what's going on with this thing I read in the paper with this sexual harassment.
Well, number one, way off topic. Number two, these types of allegations are made against public officials all the time, and they're generally settled in exactly the way all over the country as they were settled here, because simply that's usually what the result of the lawyers telling them to do is. Settle, it's cheaper, and go ahead and do it.
I have a question for you. Why does the taxpayers have to stand the burden of these people's wrongdoing?
Well, okay, Wednesday morning, go down to that county commission meeting and ask that question.
Thank you.
There you go. Much better. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I remember working, many, many years ago in a county where we had a new county clerk. He came into his office and he let go 14 people and brought in all new people. And there was this huge hue and cry, how dare he? Well, he was a Republican, so he was immediately attacked for doing it because he was replacing somebody from the other party who he had defeated in an election. And I'll never forget, one of those outgoing Democrats leaving the office told me, I was over doing a story about this, and she said to me, happens all the time. A new clerk brings in their people. And we hear people jumping up and down and say, well, why would they settle this case? And this is awful. What kind of man is he? From my perspective, Tom Carter is a fine man. And number two, these types of claims they're as frequent as mosquitoes in summer, okay? Okay, maybe not quite in our dry climate, but in some parts of the country, let's say mosquitoes in Minnesota in the dead of summer, where they have actually not 10,000 lakes, but about 12,000. And so these allegations are made all the time. What happens is the lawyers just simply say it's cheaper to settle them than it is to go have the case get dragged out in some courtroom. And I know somebody was hinting last week that I should be talking about it a couple of different times. Well, there you have my answer. And I wholeheartedly endorse the sheriff for re-election. If that helps, you understand where I'm coming from on all of this. You know why? Because they do the job well. I think most people would acknowledge the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department, when it comes to law enforcement and prevention efforts and outreach efforts, is among the best. And for some reason, and I keep telling you people this, having lived east of the Mississippi and actually having lived on the East Coast, you don't know how good you have it here, because I constantly hear complaints about this senator or that senator or this sheriff or, you cannot believe the graft and corruption that takes place back on the East Coast. I've worked in broadcasting now. This is my in about 5 different states. And let me tell you something. This is the cleanest place I've ever been. 929, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. Oh, there are those people who are angry that, Tom Carter didn't drive across the state line over into Burns, Oregon, and punched that sheriff over there right in the nose last winter, who thought that that's what his job was. But, I'm telling you, that's not how it works. And if the people there would like a different sheriff, they can go to the ballot box and make that decision. Case closed. 72. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com.